The Debrief with Jared Hudson is a dynamic podcast hosted by former U.S. Navy SEAL Jared Hudson. Join him as he sits down with captivating guests to dive into a variety of topics, offering insightful conversations and unique perspectives. From military experiences to current affairs, each episode promises to bring the truth about the world around us.
Well, Stan, good to see you again, brother.
Good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, man, it's been a couple months, been about maybe 6 months since we last talked, and one of the most amazing things with this podcast is as people start listening, as our following grows, and a lot more people hear of the different programs or the different podcasts that we've already put out. We had a lot of people listening to yours. A lot of people have actually sent us messages, sent Stephen messages, through our media account. Hey, I want to hear more about what Stan Cooke has to say about Israel, about what's going on in the Middle East and in the world. And so with that said, that's why we called you up. I appreciate you being willing to come back on a second time and talk about some of the things that that maybe most of the rest of us don't know.
Well, thank you. And if we can help and educate everyone about what's going on in the world, the truth, that's what matters to me. And sometimes the truth is ugly, Jared.
Yeah.
And sometimes the truth points at people that we don't want to point at. The world is on fire today, and it's worse than when I first met with you 6 months ago. And things are falling into place, and also I think we found new ways to fall apart.
Yeah,
we have. Really a mess, especially in the Middle East, but Europe too. Europe's a mess. And we're going to see a lot of problems across the European continent and Africa. But the Middle East is the launch pad for all of this.
Now, something that was interesting on our last interview, we talked very specifically about Israel and what's going on in Israel and how that impacts, even us as Americans and a lot of what's going on. But some of the things that you said at the time hadn't happened yet. And then sure enough, within a couple of weeks or a couple of months, a lot of what you said, hey, this is what you can expect to see, actually happened. And so I think that's one of the most interesting thing about our conversation last time, and that people have been interested in, is they're like, hang on a second, this guy said this 2 months before this went down, and then sure enough, we see it taking place. So something that we want to cover today is, one, what's the 30,000-foot view? And you just mentioned it, hey, this is going to impact European countries. This impacts us in the United States of America. It impacted the Olympics. Look at all the kids that were killed there in, was it Great Britain?
Yes.
Where the children were killed, and then you have all of the protests around the Olympics and all that stuff going. So you have all of these things happening where a lot of people from a bunch of different areas are coming together, and then we see a lot of nefarious activity taking place. A lot of it relating to what's going on in the Middle East. You're saying the Middle East is a launch pad for it. And then obviously we've got a presidential election coming up. How does that impact the United States of America? We already saw at the Democrat National Convention last night, a bunch of Palestinian protesters at the convention burned a house down. So I kind of want to get a 30,000-foot view of how the Middle East is the launch pad and hits the rest of the world, or hits us as we live here in the United States of America. And then also any specific brass tacks you want to get into with any specific country, whether it's some of the African countries, Israel, wherever. So that's kind of how we're going to flow with this today.
Well, from that 30,000 view downward, it would appear that the Muslims are, and I'm not going to say Muslim extremist, unapologetically, Jared, Arab Muslims want to kill everyone that does not agree with them. I will say there are no good Muslims. Because ultimately, their Quran says, if you do not agree with Islam, that the Muslims have the right to kill us. Anyone that disagrees with them, whether that's a Christian, a Jew, a Buddhist, a Hindu, it doesn't matter. Their faith gives them permission to lie, cheat, steal, whatever it takes to convert a non-believer to the Muslim faith. They're also
so that convert or die situation. I mean, that's really, really true to what they believe when you hear people say that.
It goes back to 700 A.D. when they were marching through Africa, the Middle East, Mecca, Medina. Then they had their caliphate, the grand caliphate that they wanted, and they almost succeeded. They reached Portugal, they reached Spain, all of southern Europe, and it took the Crusades starting around 1099 up until 1400. It took the Crusades across Europe, which were bloody, horrific, horrible battles, but to drive the Muslim extremists back into the Middle East. And only now have they started again. They haven't forgotten what happened 900 years ago. Their plan for a caliphate around the world has not changed, and their mode of operation hasn't changed. Only the weapons of warfare have changed, and it's still kill or die. The Muslims, though, now have something going internally in their spirit, in their nature, within their political structure that they didn't have 1,000 years ago. And that's a cause and effect relationship. And what I mean by that is 1,000 years ago, they just had their religion, they had their leader, they had their grand scheme, their grand plan. But now they have something else happening. They have the Western powers, the Five Eyes. They have the United States, England, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, other countries who are impacting the political arena in the Middle East and in Europe, trying to handpick who is the leader and who is not the leader. A little rabbit trail. The United States is 100% responsible for Saddam Hussein coming to power and taking him out. We were responsible for the Shah of Iran coming to power and taking him out, and we allowed the Ayatollah Khomeini to come into power and go from Persia to Iran. We were responsible for Muammar Gaddafi being put into power in Libya and then taking him out. So we have meddled in world affairs. Now, the average American citizen doesn't know this, and pretty much they don't care, but you're going to start to care more because the Western world, when George W. Bush, on September the 11th, 2001, after one of the Gulf War battles, came to the United States and to the United Nations, he repeated it twice on the same day. And notice the date, September the 11th, 2001. He made the comment that we will have a new world order governed by the rule of law, not the savage of the jungle, but by Western law is what he meant. And the Western powers of the world, the United States and the old world of England and Scotland and Ireland and France. And the Muslim world took note of that. That's the true reason you had the 9/11 attack in 2011.
So what is saying? So
I'm sorry, I got my dates back.
So he said that George W. said that in the 90s.
In the 90s, and his dad's George H.W. Bush said it in the 90s, and his son said it in 2000.
George W. said it in 2000. I got
2000.
you.
So we've got a new world order. Well, the Muslim world knew what that meant. The rest of the world may not have known what that meant, but they absolutely knew. And now that's the cause and effect. So they're after all of us.
So what would be the purpose? And you might not know this, and it might be speculation. I don't know. I'd put it this way: I don't know. That's why I'm asking. What would be the purpose of standing up a leader and then removing a leader? It's almost like it's a futile effort. If Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, as you go down the list of all these leaders you just mentioned. What is the purpose behind that? What's our goal?
The number one goal would be stabilization of a country. The second purpose would be totally selfish, to control their energy supply, which we've done. The third reason would be economics. There's other things other than oil or natural gas. Every one of those countries that we have controlled have those things in common. Major seaports, major mineral rights, oil, natural gas. I know a lot of people said that it was a war for oil during the First and Second Gulf War. Well, they were right, absolutely right. So we found a new partner to do business with. We didn't want to have partners with the Syrian leadership, so we found the Kurds in northern Syria. And the Kurds in northern Syria want to work against Turkey, work against Syria, work against Iraq and Iran. So we found a new friend in that part of the world. The Muslim world has not overlooked that. So during the Obama Arab Spring and the total chaos hit the Middle East, and you've got hundreds of thousands of military-aged men, Muslims, scattering across the world, coming across the Greek border, the Turkey border, going into England and France, going into Latin America, South America, Central America, finding their way to the United States. Since the mid-90s, this infiltration of every Western country, whether it's in Europe or the United States, Canada, Mexico, they have infiltrated. And now they're taking over cities like Dearborn, Michigan, London, England, and they're there to stay. And they let you know that that's their land now, that belongs to them. The grander scheme of looking at this is now they have their agents on the ground to do their bidding. And there are Muslim men of fighting age in all of the Western governments of the world ready to cause chaos and confusion and commit crime. And we're seeing that now. The Democrat National Convention last night, you see the pro-Palestinian parades. I was recently in London, England. An amazing thing, but I need to preface this. London, England, or the United Kingdom now has a communist for a prime minister. That man is total communist. They set up one of the most evil things that has ever happened over a 5-day period. A man had his children and wife murdered in front of him. He goes on television and talks about illegal immigrants coming into their country, killing his family, which was all true. And the man can't help who he is. He's a British citizen, and he can't help that the perpetrator was a Muslim extremist in the name of Allah, killed his family. So that happened on one day, and the very next day, the prime minister said, we have a right-wing extremist group in the United Kingdom that's against immigrants.
Based on what that man said, who lost his family at the hands of a Muslim who killed him in the name of Allah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So within 24 hours, he is on the BBC telling everyone we have a large contingency of right-wing extremists in the United Kingdom. Within 48 hours, while I'm there in country, we get a message on our phones that the prime minister is shutting down all tourism, all outdoor activities, everything that people could participate in after like 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and told everybody to go home, and that the right wing was going to attack in London and other cities, major cities of the United Kingdom.
So they put a curfew on, anybody in London at the time, right?
Yes, on that particular day. Totally out of the ordinary for that country. Later that night at 9 o'clock, they show over 100,000 people in protest in the city called Bath, B-A-T-H. It's an old Roman fortress in the United Kingdom. There's not 100,000 people that live there. And then they show the pictures of homes burning and buildings burning. I was in that city just a day earlier. Those places were abandoned. They didn't belong to anybody. They were run down. They were condemned already. But the government portrayed it as the right-wing extremist is burning down the cities in the name of wanting the immigrants out of the country. And it wasn't true. And then he comes on television within an hour and on the BBC and says he's going to shut down Facebook and he's going to shut down X or Twitter and every other social media platform, and England will only get its news through the BBC.
Wow.
So he's causing problems to happen that wasn't true. He lied to the British citizens, the people of Scotland and Ireland. There was no right-wing extremist attack, and the only protest were the Palestinians, the Muslims in the street, protesting and attacking.
And what were they? What were they specifically protesting? Do we know?
They were protesting the right-wing extremist or racism.
Oh, okay.
It was all about racism, and you don't like people our color, but none of that took place. But that's what was portrayed on the television. So there are people who are working in lockstep, hand in hand with the Muslim extremists, to promote an agenda that's beyond American comprehension.
Yeah, so and there's probably not a good answer to this, but why say all of that's the case and they're working hand in hand with them? Now, they're not Muslims that are working hand in hand with them, but why would they work hand in hand? One of the things that I don't understand is when I see the signs LGBTQ community for, free the Palestinians or, end the war in Gaza and all that, this pro-Palestinian LGBTQ movement or whatever. Now, I spent a lot of time overseas, and that's one thing that I know. They kill these people. There's no, if you're a homosexual in a Muslim country,
yes,
you die. You're killed. And so that's one thing that I guess I don't fully understand. Are people that foolish, or do they just not know? Or I don't know.
I think it's a big spectrum of foolish, uneducated, but there are two main principles behind what we're discussing is this. Number one is greed. It's about money. So the big business world, the corporate leaders, somewhere see an advantage of supporting the LGBT community or the Muslim extremist community. They're invested with the Saudis or the Iranians or the people in Syria, and they want to make sure their investments stay secure, so they take their side.
Yeah.
But, Jared, there's also another element that's more dangerous than those people, and that is the element that they want to see the American way of life, the American culture, the American dream. They want it dead because we stand in the way of every government that's socialistic, of every government that's communist, and all of the Islamic world. We're the only thing that stands in the way. The old world, England, and the new world, the United States, are the two primary forces that stand in the way of this world today being overrun with communism. Now, I know you get laughed at today if you talk about communism, but that's what it is. And Ronald Reagan said, when liberalism comes to the United States, it will either be called, or when communism comes to the United States, it's going to be called socialism or liberalism or the left. It's here.
Oh, yeah.
It's
it's for sure here. So to kind of package that a little bit more to where we might want to go with this, we see a buddy of mine, Sean Ryan. He has a big show, big podcast show. It has a lot of different people on. He has a CIA targeter come on, and she talked about specifically the Muslim Brotherhood being a big funder. You talk about money, being a big donor to the Democrat Party as a whole. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know where she got that information. I guess you could probably find out, but almost like the Muslim Brotherhood is a lobbyist group lobbying for legislation or whatever they want on their behalf, and they're doing it through the Democratic Party. Do you know anything about that? Or, you talked about money being one of the big ties. So is that something that you know anything about?
Yeah, and we can talk about the Muslim Brotherhood in another aspect too. But the Muslim Brotherhood is the primary or the origin point in Egypt of all Islamic extremism since about 1960s. That's what gave birth to Yasser Arafat and the PLO. The Muslim Brotherhood now operates in every country in the Middle East. The Jordanians are scared to death of them. The Saudis are scared of them, but they have their own extremist group in Saudi Arabia as well. But the way they operate is they take money from all the Arab nations, the Arab League, and they funnel that money into nonprofits all across Europe and in the Middle East. And then that money in nonprofit organizations or non-governmental organizations is transferred to the United States or to the United Kingdom to other nonprofits. So it's washed 2 and 3 times. And then it winds up in political candidates' pockets, into campaigns, into the Democrat Party National Committee, and to their Treasury Fund. And that's the way it works. And it's happening all across this country.
So it's very hard maybe tracking it from nefarious point, let's say Muslim Brotherhood, to a Democrat candidate. It goes through multiple funnels before it makes it to that candidate.
I think at this point, the CIA and the FBI has been able to track some veins of that flow of money, not all, and they know enough to know what's happening, and they can prove it. Now, if you might say, well, if they can prove it, how come they don't do anything about it? Well, sometimes you don't want to kill the rats on the lower part of the floor.
Right.
You want to go after the big ones.
Yeah.
So you don't go after the enemy, the couriers. You don't want to go after the small guys. You want to wait till they tip their hand and you've got the head of these organizations exposed. And I think that is what's happening now in a lot of ways. I think that's why the Iranians are very nervous, because we're on to them. I believe there's some men in Saudi Arabia today who are very upset because they're supposed to be our friends.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you, you go back to 9/11 and you count how many of those men that crashed those planes and for what country they were from, and 19 of them were Saudi Arabians.
Wow.
They did not come from Iraq. They didn't come from Egypt. They were Saudi Arabians, and we never did anything about it. And
Wow.
I think we're learning more now why we didn't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, so money, power, whatever might be why even individuals who are, not Muslim are partnering with nefarious individuals in the Muslim world who are for the ultimate world takeover, right?
Right.
Their ideology that they push for. What about what we see going on right now? And you said the Middle East is kind of the launch pad for what's going on. We see what happened in London. We see them going all around the world. What other locations, number one? And two, what are you seeing with that Middle East being the launch pad? All eyes are on, Gaza, Israel, Palestinian, war, all that stuff. What's kind of happening there that you can talk about or maybe package for us?
Okay. Well, a little side constraint. While we're focused on Gaza and we're focused on Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, the Muslims are killing Christians and Hindus and Buddhists all across the Middle East and in South Africa. They're dying by the tens of thousands every month. There are some countries now in Africa where the Christian community has flowed completely out of one country into another because their homes are burned, their farms are overrun, taken over. The Muslim world is conquering Africa. The United States is not doing anything about it, but neither is France or Great Britain. But I believe the next thing that you need to watch for, the next tipping point that they're going to try to push, is in the country of Jordan. Currently, the Muslim Brotherhood operates there, and they had probably 1/3 of the seats in their parliament occupied by members of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Wow.
We, the United States, and Israel, and the United Kingdom has special operations units, and it's publicly known, this is not a big secret that we shouldn't be talking about, that they protect King Abdullah of Jordan because he can't trust his own inner circle to protect him.
Wow.
So we are there protecting him, and we've been there for some time since he took over. The Obama administration disrupted all of that in Syria and Jordan, and we see Syria now is ripped apart with civil war. Jared, I blame Barack Obama for that civil war, and Hillary Clinton, by the way. They're the ones that caused that country to be ripped apart. It's going to be sliced into thirds, by the way, when it's over. And that's an intended plan to slice Syria into 3 separate little countries where we take over the oil and we destroy certain elements of the Assad's Ba'ath Party that is in the country of Syria. But what's going on in Jordan?
And we stood Assad up. How many years ago? 15 years ago?
Well, we put his father in power. We embraced him because he was kind to the Christian community in Syria. But now we're taking him down. Now he's going the way of Saddam Hussein. But what is about to happen in the country of Jordan is they want to push Jordan into complete Islamic control of Iran. Iran does not care about controlling Iraq anymore. They used to, but now Iraq's destroyed thanks to us. And now they want to take over Jordan, because if they can take over the country of Jordan, they can put hundreds of thousands of military men with all types of weapons on the Israeli border coming from the east, and Israel will be overwhelmed. And that is their goal. The man that's in the most danger today, but the most protected man in the world today, is King Abdullah of Jordan, because he holds the power and keeps that from happening.
I met King Abdullah one time when I was in the SEAL teams. We went to Jordan to do some work with those guys over at Kasadic, and then down in Aqaba. Is that down off the Red Sea?
Yes.
And we went down there anyway. I met him. We flew in. He was there. We flew in. We met with him and wound up working with some of those guys. So that's interesting. I mean, that's just interesting to hear. I mean, he's been there for a long time.
He has. His father turned out to be a fair, modest leader.
Yeah.
King Hussein, and now he is doing quite well, but he needs our help because he is in danger.
And how long has he been in power? He's been there 20-ish years, 25 years, or longer than that?
20 years. That's
20 years.
It's a good guesstimate of his time.
Gotcha.
The problem that we're seeing now with Jordan is that the Muslim Brotherhood is controlling the politics.
Wow.
And last May of 2023, one of the ministers of parliament went into Israel with a pickup truck load of guns and weapons, or a box truck rather, with guns and weapons. He was arrested. Israel interrogated him and gave him back to the Jordanians. And I will tell you today, he's being interrogated by the United States and by the Jordanians.
Now, wasn't there an attack, not an attack, I don't know if you could call it that, but they breached Quantico, I believe. They breached a Marine base. I think it was Quantico is where they breached, and it was Jordanians that breached it. Is that correct? A couple months ago, maybe?
That's right, Jordanians, and they were members of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay.
They're trained, very well trained. They're just not adherents to the faith.
Right.
These men are trained in military aspect of way of life.
And they were here legally. I mean, they were not. It wasn't like these are illegal immigrants burning across the border with an open border. These guys were here legally.
That's it. They've learned to operate. Use the system. If you use the system, that's your best cover.
Right.
Don't come across illegal. Come across legally.
Right.
And then you're not under the radar.
Yeah.
I guess to wrap up Jordan for you real quick, the country of Jordan is infiltrated by the Muslim Brotherhood, by the Iranians, but we did something there. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. This is why these people are so angry at us, and they're taking out their wrath on us. Barack Obama found a group of men, the Kurds in the north, that he wanted to finance and funnel in his war to take out the leader, Assad, of Syria. But he needed a group from the south because the Kurds were not capable of doing it on their own. Their numbers were not sufficient. So we identified through our intelligence agencies large number of dissidents in Syria, men who would become Syrian rebels. And our intelligence agency took thousands and thousands of men into the country of Jordan to train them to overthrow Assad. And we were funneling weapons into the country of Jordan through our intelligence agency. Elaborate weapons, sophisticated weapons, brand new weapons, not the old M16s and M4s from Afghanistan and the other wars that we have fought. And so for the entire Barack Obama administration, we are equipping an army to attack Damascus from the south. And they're based in the country of Jordan.
Wow.
Something happened. When Donald Trump was president, 2 Americans and 1 Israeli was shot and killed in Amman, Jordan, protecting King Abdullah. And they were killed with American-made weapons.
Wow. Is that public?
It's public now.
You can so you can look it
public
up
now.
on news or whatever. And
Yes.
Wow.
You can open source any of this information now.
Gotcha.
About a month ago, you couldn't. But
Oh.
today, it's It's publicized.
And this was when Trump was president that this happened.
Yeah, so when Trump was president, 2 American soldiers, 1 Israeli was killed with American weapons, American ammunition. And we find out that the Muslim Brotherhood had intercepted a large cache of weapons that our intelligence agency from the United States was shipping from gun manufacturers in this country to the country of Jordan, never anticipating that the Muslim Brotherhood would intercept these weapons. Now they control a very large amount of American weapons. And I can tell you today that those weapons have flowed from Jordan into Israel, and those weapons in the West Bank are now killing Jewish citizens.
Wow.
And they're our guns. They should have never been there. We should not have done this. Trump put a stop to it, and as soon as Biden comes back into office, he turns the switch back on, and here we go again.
Sounds a lot like the Fast and the Furious case. Remember when the Border Patrol agents were shot with our guns that were sent to the cartels? They tracked them back to U.S. government sources. So it's a similar situation, just now the Middle East.
Yeah, very same thing, Jared. Very same thing. So the people in Iran take note of that. The Muslim extremists take note of that, and they see that we're preparing an army in Jordan to attack Syria, to cut it into 3 pieces. Well, that same army is there today to protect King Abdullah, and that's going to be the focal point of the next war. Jordan is on the list next. So Gaza is going to be a problem. Lebanon is going to be a problem. Israel is not finished there, but Jordan is the next hot seat place for strife to start up and a war to start.
So Jordan's the next hot seat, based on all that you've just told us, and there's a lot of that. That's a lot of good information, and you said a lot of it's open source for people to be able to dig into and find themselves.
Yes.
Now, you just got back from a trip to Israel. You were working with our government, their government, and other entities. You're working with quite a few different organizations and government entities, I guess. What can you tell us about your trip to Jordan, your trip to Israel, and what you saw, and kind of what we can expect as we see that war or that situation continue to progress?
Well, the first thing, the IDF is going to start destroying the tunnels in Gaza from the north to the south in a progression, from the east to the west to the Mediterranean Ocean. There is a road that is, I told you it would be built, and now that road is complete, a major highway from Israel to the Mediterranean Ocean. They are building a permanent seaport there at the end of that road.
I've seen a picture of that road too. I mean, you can see where they're working on it or whatever.
Yeah, very elaborate. And it's not just a dirt road through the desert. This thing is now concreted and asphalt.
Right.
It has water, natural gas, electricity. They are planning for major infrastructure along that highway. And they have invited or insisting that the United States Navy and the Marines take over the northern part of Gaza. Well, as we speak this morning, that naval force is setting off the coast. They have arrived.
They're off the coast of Gaza.
Off the coast of Gaza, off the coast of the Gaza-Egyptian border. Our naval fleet in the Mediterranean has pulled within miles of the coast, and we are preparing either for war or for a protection of Israel as they wrap up their Gaza mission. So that will be next. Gaza will be wrapped up soon. Then after the end of October, 1st of November, you will see a full-scale war take place in Lebanon against Hezbollah.
And that's Israel hammering down on Hezbollah in particular in Lebanon. Why wait till October or November? Does it tie to our election in any way with maybe U.S. support or no?
Yes, there are 3 factors there. Number one is the United States election. They are counting on Donald Trump being elected. Israel.
The Israelis are counting on Donald Trump being elected.
Yeah, the Israelis need Donald Trump, his promises, his convictions, his moral clarity on the Middle Eastern issues. They need that. The second thing is they're going to have an election of their own. Netanyahu's days are numbered. There's a man by the name of Naftali Bennett. Bennett is very conservative. If you would put him in the American political arena, he would be a constitutional conservative. But in Israel's point of view, very strong man, very strong leader, stronger than Netanyahu, very well respected. And when I was in the country, they ran a poll, the liberal media and the conservative media ran a poll in Israel and said, who would you prefer to be your leader today? All the liberals lost. Netanyahu came in second. Naftali Bennett came in first.
Wow.
So they want him today. So there's our election. There is an election for Israel coming up very soon. But the rainy season is the key. When the rainy season starts, it usually happens in October, November. The rain is in floods and torrents of rain as you come from Turkey down to Syria and make your way to the Israeli border. Their weather is completely opposite there. Everything runs south to north here. There it goes north to south. They want the floods to take place in Lebanon and Syria. So the Hezbollah troops are bogged down in the mud and the mire. They can't move. And they're easier targets. Israel is prepared to fight in those conditions. Hezbollah is not. And also, they need something from the United States, and that is our radar planes flying over, directing airstrikes, jamming certain facilities where they can go in and take out their command and control centers. They need our help. So they need Donald Trump to provide that.
Right.
The AWACS planes, for instance, they need that over the Middle East so that they can coordinate their attacks. But they need to take out Hezbollah, or what we see today on the news is going to continue.
Yeah, it's just the nonstop attacks and fighting, rocket attacks and all that. They got to put that fire out before it continues to burn and ultimately harms them more than they can recover from. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jared, you have 30,000 Israelis that live on that northern border that cannot go home. Those people are occupying hotels all across the country.
So there's still a lot of displaced people near those war-torn border areas.
Yeah, they're displaced. They can't go home. Haven't been home in 8 months.
Yeah, I remember when we went there back in November, I guess, of last year. It was like ghost towns in those areas. When we went up to those areas with some of the IDF guys and some of the intel guys, it was complete ghost towns. Yeah. And it's still that way.
It's still that way. And those people are unemployed, living at the mercy of the government.
Wow.
And they just want to go home.
Yeah.
It's their home.
So we have that happening in Israel. You talk specifically about some firearms. Maybe we could get into that a little bit, talking about the firearm piece. There's a lot going on in the West Bank right now, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of terrorist activity, or there's a lot of threats against Israel in the West Bank. That's where most of their internal issues come from. And you said there were firearms getting into the West Bank through Jordan? From Jordan. Can you maybe expound on that a little bit?
Yes. The firearms that have been brought to the country of Jordan.
And these are U.S. firearms.
These are U.S. manufactured firearms, things that should be in the inventory of our military, of our government, of our special ops, of our CIA and our FBI. These are weapons that were specifically designed for our military and no one else. Well, now they're in Jordan. And what the Jordanians were doing, they found two ways to smuggle the weapons. The Muslim Brotherhood that's in Jordan. Let me clear that up. Not Jordanians, but the Muslim Brotherhood, the Muslim extremists. And what they've done is they have taken tour buses, and there are compartments under the seats of tour buses. So when tour buses were going over into Jordan, let's say to Petra, or going to Amman, or to Jerish, which is an amazing Crusader castle, and people would get off the bus, and they would be off those buses for 3 and 4 or 5 hours. Someone was loading those buses down with weapons and ammunition.
Wow.
So when they're coming back through and they stop for the night, the people get off the bus and go to their hotel. Those buses were dropping off ammunition and weapons to people in the West Bank, in the cities of Nablus and Jenin and Ramallah. Well, then there's food shipments that come from Jordan as well. and they were taking trucks with cavities in the bed of the truck, false cavities, and the floors were really easy to pick those out. Usually you have slatted wood floors that are screwed down individually. Well, those trucks were never used. But trucks with floors that were all one piece of metal on the inside. While I was there, they lifted up one of those trucks, and there is 8 men crammed into the bottom of that truck.
Wow.
The illegals coming from Jordan.
So they're smuggling people too, not just guns. They're smuggling fighters in.
They're smuggling people, drugs, and weapons. But the weapons that they're smuggling are our weapons. They're United States-made weapons.
Have you seen any of those weapons?
Yes, I saw those weapons with my own eyes. So just pick any manufacturer of military-grade weapons, and that's what's there on the ground in their hands. I have a picture on my phone of a dead Palestinian from Nablus who is holding a brand new American-made rifle. And so those rifles were examined, and I would say about 90% of those rifles that we saw, they had their serial numbers scraped away. A Dremel or some type of a file got rid of those numbers. But then there was another set of weapons. There were ghost guns. There were no serial numbers.
No serial numbers.
Yes, no serial numbers. The stamp that said that should have said property of the United States government wasn't on those weapons. Just the manufacturing stamp. So that's very suspicious.
Yeah.
That is a major problem that we have manufactured weapons. Now, to be fair, could they be Chinese replicas?
Clones or something, yeah.
They could be. But what has been seen and what has been handled, the quality and the grade of the metal in those weapons is not a Chinese knockoff.
Yeah.
It's just not. So we're seeing some systemic breakdown in the flow of our military application of weapons going to foreign countries. Maybe 2 or 3 months ago, we would have talked about were these coming from Ukraine? Were weapons flowing to Ukraine? And we know there's a big weapons arms dealer in Ukraine. He's selling weapons around the world. But now I'm convinced, personally, that these weapons didn't come from Ukraine, that these weapons were flowing from the United States to the Syrian troops that are being trained in Jordan. They were intercepted by the Muslim Brotherhood, and now they're in Nablus, Jenin, and Ramallah being used to kill Israeli citizens.
Wow. And then we're still dumping money and effort and time into Israel to support Israel, however much or however little the Biden administration is doing, and however much or however little the Trump administration would do. But it's like you're working against yourself. Kind of like that movie with Clint Eastwood, is it For a Few Dollars More, where he keeps working both sides, right?
Yes.
Keeps working both sides. That kind of feels like what we're doing a little bit here then, if that's the case. Is that kind of what it is?
Yes, it is. And I can tell you, again, this is open sourced. You can find this now. Again, 30, 45 days ago, you could not have found this. But today, as we say here, you can. When all of these weapons were discovered, when the gentlemen were killed, the soldiers were killed protecting King Abdullah.
Right. That was a few years ago, right?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. The FBI was called in to go into Jordan and investigate. And when they go in, they do their thorough investigation, did a great investigation. They found out these weapons were American sourced. The weapons were from America. The weapons came from us. And they found out it was our other intelligence agency supplying the weapons. And the right hand was not telling the left hand what was going on.
Wow.
So we made all of this hullabaloo about NSA and CIA and FBI and everybody not talking to each other, and that's why 9/11 happened. Jared, they're still not talking.
Still same problem, just different time.
And it's intentional. It is deliberate. It's not a breakdown of communication. This is deliberate. The FBI was stunned. They were shocked at what happened.
Wow.
And then their hands get tied. There's no more investigation. There's no prosecution. It just goes away.
So With all that, what can we expect to see over the next coming weeks and coming months? Obviously, you said expect to see something start to kick off a little bit heavier in Lebanon, which it already is. There's already stuff going on between Israel and Lebanon, but you could say possibly see that kick off even harder. You've got Muslim attacks worldwide against Christians. We're definitely seeing an issue, at least with the pro-Palestinian folks here. You know, they were at the Capitol and removed the American flag and burned it and raised a Palestinian flag. They're at the Democrat National Convention. Even if you're a conservative, you don't like to see these protesters out, and they're out there at the Democrat National Convention protesting, burning houses down. You see it in London, you see that. So we've got a lot of things that we've talked about, whether it's Muslims attacking Christians or anybody who believes differently than them, whether it's Israel with the push that they're looking to do, whether it's multiple elections coming up, one in the U.S., one coming up in Israel.
Right. What
can we possibly expect to see over the coming months with all of this stuff kind of coalescing and coming together at the same time?
I think the war in Jordan, there will be the beginning of a war in Jordan, maybe the overthrow of government. That will be one thing that we should look for. King Abdullah's life is in peril. We need to look for that. The second thing is Damascus, Syria. It is the number one target for war today. You have Russian troops on the ground in Damascus. Mm-hmm. You have Russian missiles with nerve gas, chemical weapons all around Damascus. Israel's trying to find a strategic way to take those out without killing the innocents, but they may not be able to do that. So you have to ask the question, do we let them exist and have the capability of killing Israelis with nerve agents and chemical warfare, or do you kill an entire city?
Wow.
So that is on the table. That's a legitimate conversation today. Then Syria being cut in thirds, United States through the Kurds running the oil fields. We're almost there anyway. And then the war in Lebanon is key. But then Iran always has a card up their sleeve. There's always another country that they will engulf in a war. I think we need to be looking toward Southeast Asia, Indonesia, some of those areas that's heavily populated with Muslim believers. And then I think we're going to see Africa on fire in the next 3 or 4 months. Every African nation is under the target of the Muslims. And I do believe that we're going to see that happen. And one final thing, keep your eye on Libya. It's not over there. I know the other night I watched a documentary on Benghazi and why we wound up in that position in Libya. Well, those elements have not gone away. They're growing worse. And lo and behold, they control every airport now.
Wow.
And every aircraft that was left on the ground, the Libyans now control. And there is rumors in the intelligence world that the Muslim Brotherhood is in Libya arming 747s, 707s, passenger planes with all types of explosive devices, just plain fuel, diesel fuel and gasoline, taking out the passenger seats. And they were preparing those planes to make missions across the Mediterranean and hit European nations. So that is something that's in the wind. I would be watching for that as well. Libya is going to become another flashpoint again.
All right. Well, nothing like a bunch of good news to end a quick show on. We'll have you back on maybe in a couple months when some of this happens, or if some of it doesn't happen. Now, as a question, this is just my question to you. You're tied into a lot of this stuff. I think we discussed it on the last podcast. Your background in politics here nationally and then also internationally, being involved in some political stuff overseas with different countries. What is your prediction for the U.S. election coming up? We got Kamala Harris at the point we're at now. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz on a ticket, and then you've got Donald Trump, and J.D. Vance on a ticket. What is your prediction for our upcoming election on November the 12th?
I think if the election is fair, Trump wins in a landslide. But I don't expect the election to be fair. I still think Trump wins, but barely by a few electoral college votes. But I think the American public will wake up and see that Kamala Harris will be devastating for this country. She is more than a liberal. She's more than a socialist. And she doesn't have a clue what she's doing. This individual does not have a clue on how to run a state, a city, a government of a country, and she's dangerous. And again, you're going to have someone telling her what to do. The question is, who are they? So I still think Trump wins, but barely in a practical world. In my Stan Cooke world, if the election was free and fair, he'd win in a landslide.
Yeah. One thing that was interesting, a buddy of mine told me, he was one of the snipers on the Trump assassination shoot. He said conservatively there was 15 or 16,000 people at that rally that day.
Yes.
Which is that's mind-boggling to me. That's a ton of people at a small location rally. So, you know what? I hope you're right for our country's sake. I really do. And man, I appreciate you sharing that. Just kind of a quick update. Hopefully, the listeners are able to take it and learn from it and dig on their own.
Yes.
And I encourage everybody to do that. Dig on your own. Look at the open source stuff that's out there and levy what's being said here against what you find. And hopefully, as we weed through it all, we know there's only one truth, and hopefully we find exactly what that truth is. So
That's right.
Thank you so much, Stan. Thanks for coming on, and good seeing you, brother.
This episode is sponsored by Covenant Rescue Group. Covenant Rescue Group is a nonprofit organization that combats human trafficking and child exploitation. They support operations globally leading to real rescues, real arrests, and real prosecutions. Foundational to this is funding the operations from the training to the rescue. They join their team with other organizations and law enforcement agencies providing resources and manpower needed to conduct successful anti-human trafficking operations. This includes undercover child exploitation stings and rescue operations that dynamically break up human trafficking rings. Visit www.covenantrescue.org to learn more and donate.